Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, the Samam Bonam, chapter 53, entitled as Krishna Kidnaps Rukmini, and we'll be covering verses 51 to 57 today. So this is the end of the chapter, the last 7 verses of the chapter. So I'll read the translation and the purports because they are fairly big, so I'll skip the Sanskrit today. So this is 51 to 57. Translation. Rukmini appeared as enchanting as the Lord's illusory potency, who enchants even the sober and grave. Thus the kings gazed upon her virgin beauty, her shapely waist, and her lovely face adorned with earrings. Her hips were graced with a jewel-studded belt. Her breasts were just budding, and her eyes seemed apprehensive of her encroaching locks of hair. She smiled sweetly, her jasmine bud teeth reflecting the glow of her bimba red lips. As she walked with the motions of a royal swan, the effulgence of her tinkling ankle bells beautified her feet. Seeing her, the assembled heroes were totally bewildered. Lust tore at their hearts. Indeed, when the kings saw her broad smile and shy glance, they became stupefied, dropped their weapons, and fell unconscious to the ground from their elephants, chariots, and horses. On the pretext of the procession, Rukmini displayed her beauty for Krishna alone. Slowly she advanced, the two moving lotus whorls of her feet, awaiting the arrival of the Supreme Lord. With the fingernails of her left hand, she pushed some strands of hair away from her face and shyly looked from the corners of her eyes at the kings standing before her. At that moment, she saw Krishna. Then, while his enemies looked on, the Lord seized the princess, who was eager to mount his chariot. Purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, Rukmini was anxious that her locks of hair might impede her vision, since she was most eager to see her beloved Krishna. The non-devotees or demons are bewildered at seeing the opulences of the Lord and think that his potency is meant for their gross sense gratification. But Rukmini, an expansion of Krishna's internal pleasure potency, was meant for the Lord alone. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes the following verse to describe the kind of woman known as Shama. A woman is called Shama when her breasts are very firm and when someone in her presence feels warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti further points out that since the beautiful form of Rukmini is a manifestation of the Lord's internal energy, the non-devotees cannot perceive her. Thus the heroic kings assembled in Vidarbha were agitated with lust upon seeing the Lord's illusory potency, an expansion of Rukmini. In other words, no one can lust after the Lord's eternal consort, since as soon as one's mind is contaminated with lust, the covering of Maya separates one from the pristine beauty of the spiritual world and its inhabitants. Finally, Srimati Rukmini Devi felt shy as she looked from the corners of her eyes at the other kings, for she did not want to meet the glances of those inferior men. Verse 56. Lifting the princess onto his chariot, whose flag bore the emblem of Garuda, Lord Madhava drove back the circle of kings. With Balaram in the lead, he slowly exited like a lion removing his prey from the midst of jackals. 57. The kings inimical to the Lord, headed by Jarasandha, could not tolerate this humiliating defeat. They exclaimed, "Oh, damn us! Though we are mighty archers, mere cowherds have stolen our honor, just as puny animals might steal the honor of lions." Purport. From the last two verses of this chapter, it is clear that the perverted intelligence of demons makes them perceive things in a way exactly opposite to reality. It is clearly stated that Krishna stole Rukmini like a lion taking his prey from the midst of jackals. The demons, however, saw themselves as the lions and Lord Krishna as an inferior creature. Without Krishna consciousness, life becomes most dangerous. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 53rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Krishna Kidnaps Rukmini. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishnaprishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So those were prayers to offer, to invoke auspiciousness uh, by offering respects to the Vaishnavas, Guru, Srila Prabhupada, and others, so that we can have a fruitful conversation today and go closer to Krishna. So this is the, as I said, this is the end of the chapter and a climactic part of the chapter actually. This is where, Krishna finally kidnaps Rukmini. So I seek blessings from all of you here, the senior devotees, Adi Purush Prabhu, and all of you, so that I can speak something here on the spotless Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam, and I may speak with humble service attitude in line with the Guru Parampara and in order to please all of you. So yeah, as I said, this is the climax of the pastime that we are studying in this chapter. So we will try to discuss two people in this whole pastime whose anticipations had risen to a peak. So can anyone say who? Can anyone take a guess as to who are the two people whose anticipation was at a peak at this point of time?
Rukmini and Krishna.
Rukmini and Krishna. Yes. Rukmini, yes. Rukmini and
Shishupal was waiting also, I guess.
Yes. So Rukmini and Krishna definitely. But there was one person who was negatively, his negative anticipation was at a peak, and that is Shishupal. And we'll see all that. We'll see a little bit of history and all that. So before going into the actual content of the class, I wanted to read the last two paragraphs of the Krishna book of this particular chapter that Prabhupada wrote. So I'll just read that. The chivalrous princes assembled there were so overwhelmed by Rukmini's beauty that they became almost unconscious and fell from their horses and elephants. Full of lust, they hopelessly desired Rukmini's hand, comparing their own beauty to hers. Srimati Rukmini, however, was not interested in any of them. In her heart, she was simply expecting Krishna to come and carry her away. As she was adjusting the ornaments on a finger of her left hand, she happened to look upon the princess and suddenly saw that Krishna was present amongst them. Although Rukmini had never before seen Krishna, she was always thinking of him. Thus, she had no difficulty recognizing him amongst the princely order. Krishna, unconcerned with the other princes, immediately took the opportunity to place Rukmini on his chariot, marked by a flag bearing an image of Garuda. He then proceeded slowly, without fear, taking Rukmini away exactly as a lion takes a deer from the midst of jackals. Meanwhile, Balaram appeared on the scene with the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. Jarasandha, who had many times experienced defeat by Krishna, roared, "How is this? Krishna is taking Rukmini away from us without opposition. What is the use of our being chivalrous fighters with arrows? My dear princes, just look, we are losing our reputation. He's just like a jackal taking booty from a lion." So, this is what Prabhupada writes about this particular pastime where Krishna finally kidnaps Rukmini. So, the first person, as we discussed, whose anticipation was rising was Rukmini. And here, Rukmini, it says she's eagerly waiting for Krishna. She has done her due. She has sent the letter to Krishna. In that letter, she has expressed her plan. She requests Krishna, please come and take me. And she has done whatever she can. And now she's just waiting. And of course, the Brahmana through whom she sent the letter, he actually came back and gave her the message of Krishna, saying that yes, Krishna is here and he will take you. And so she knows that Krishna will be here, and now her anticipation is rising because she's seeing all these kings present there, and she doesn't want to marry any of them, even Shishupal. She just wants to be with Krishna. And so she's anticipating that, and she's eagerly trying to search Krishna in among that group of demoniac kings present there. So she has never met him, as it says here, but she has just heard about him from the great souls. So many great souls would visit the kingdom of Bhishmaka, Narad Muni, and others, and she would hear from them about the pastimes of Krishna. She would hear from them about the glories of Krishna, about the form of Krishna, and that's how she developed an attraction to meet Krishna, to be with Krishna. And of course, Rukmini here is the internal potency of the Lord. She's the direct energy of the Lord. But this love for Krishna, this Krishna Prem, is actually present in every one of us. In all of us who are spirit souls, our true nature is to be, our constitutional position is to be the spirit soul. And as spirit souls, we are innately a servant, a loving servant of Krishna. So this love for Krishna is there in every one of us. And but how is that awakened? That can be awakened by the process of hearing, right? Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoi, right? This Krishna Prema or love for Krishna is always there within our hearts. And by the process of hearing, it can be awakened. In fact, when Srila Prabhupada arrived at the Boston Harbor in 1965, he wrote this beautiful song, Markine Bhagavad Dharma, just to express his himself on landing in the US and seeing things around him. And there he quotes that these people here are so covered by the modes of passion and ignorance that they do not have taste for Bhagavad Katha. They do not have taste to hear the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. And but then he says that, but by hearing the pastimes, by hearing Bhagavad Katha again and again, what happens? A person becomes sober, a person becomes enlightened, a person becomes a gentleman. That's what happens, he says. And then he quotes the verses, the series of verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning with this very famous verse. Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. And then he prays to Krishna, humbly prays to Krishna to give him the ability to speak Krishna Katha, to speak the pastimes of the Supreme Lord to these suffering souls. So in this way, Prabhupada writes there, and then in Nectar of Devotion, another book that Prabhupada wrote, he writes about the process of hearing, how important it is. He writes, the beginning of Krishna consciousness and devotional service is hearing, in Sanskrit called Shravanam. All people should be given the chance to come and join the devotional parties so that they may hear. This hearing is very important for progressing in Krishna consciousness. One who links his ears to the transcendental vibrations through the oral reception quickly becomes purified and cleansed in the heart. Lord Chaitanya has affirmed that this hearing is very important. It cleanses the heart of the contaminated soul so that he becomes quickly qualified to enter into devotional service and understand Krishna consciousness. So it is the beginning process. So when we hear something and then we develop a taste, that's when our Krishna consciousness begins. That's when the purification begins. And one might ask, what is so great in hearing the pastimes of the Lord? Right? There are so many other movies that come up, and so many other things in the news that come up, people doing something, people heroic deeds of other people and things like that. And so one might say, oh, Krishna's pastimes are also the same thing, right? So what is the difference? The difference is that Krishna's pastimes are different in quality, in the sense that they are the activities of the absolute truth. And the absolute truth, his name, his form, his pastimes, his qualities, and everything else, they are non-different. So the pastimes of Krishna are Krishna. The pastimes of Krishna carry the same transcendentalness that Krishna himself has. So that is why there is a very stark qualitative difference between the pastimes of Krishna and the pastimes of anyone in the material world. And that is the reason when we hear the pastimes of Krishna, it's like Krishna is manifesting there through his activities, through his words that he has spoken through his devotees in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the words that he has spoken in the Bhagavad Gita. So that's how that we can experience the transcendental nature of Krishna himself by hearing about him. But oftentimes we are so covered by our ignorance that we don't have a taste for hearing Krishna Katha. So we I remember in the initial days, even now for that matter, whenever there would be Krishna Katha, whenever I would attend, and if the class went a little long, then I would fall asleep, right there. I'm like struggling to keep myself awake. Or I would feel, oh, this is the same thing, spirit, soul, Krishna, love for God. Tell me something more. Tell me something more that has spice in it. Tell me something that it'll really raise my eyebrows, right? So this sort of an attitude is there because of our ignorance, of course. But then the scriptures, they give a solution as well. How do we get out of this ignorance, and how do we develop that taste for hearing the pastimes of Krishna? And that comes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where it says, "O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudev." So this is a nice symbiotic cycle that gets created. So we serve the great souls to develop affinity for hearing Krishna's message. And what is there in the message of Krishna? So Krishna is saying, serve my devotee. So we again go and serve the devotee, and then we develop a taste for hearing. But what do we hear? We hear that we should serve the devotees. So in this way, we talk about vicious cycles, but this is somewhat like a sublime cycle of events happening. So in this way, and in this cycle, in this sublime cycle of serving great souls, serving Vaishnavas, hearing Krishna Katha, serving great souls, Krishna Katha, our heart gets purified, and then we attain the bliss, the transcendental bliss that Krishna consciousness has to offer. So that's the first person whose anticipations were rising. And the other person whose negative anticipation was rising was Shishupal. So Shishupal is one of the negative characters in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in this whole story. And he is very critical of Krishna. He doesn't like Krishna. He hates Krishna. And there is one more person who doesn't like Krishna. That is Rukmini's own brother, Rukmi. So Rukmi also doesn't like Krishna. And now Rukmini's father, Bhishmaka, and everyone in the kingdom, they are eager to see Rukmini get married to Krishna, because they know that Rukmini is such a divine soul that none other than Krishna, no one else other than Krishna, the Supreme Lord, can be her husband. But Rukmi has a different opinion. Rukmi has a lot of hesitation to get Rukmini married to Krishna. So he's thinking, oh, this Krishna, he was born in a jail in very, so to say, controversial circumstances. And then God knows, he was, people say he was taken to Vrindavan and all that. And then his varna, his occupation is also not, his social class is also not very obvious. In childhood, he grew up in among cowherds, and then after he grew up to certain age, he came back to Mathura, and then there he's in a family of Kshatriyas. So is he a warrior or is he a cowherd? It's all so mysterious and also, controversial with Krishna, he thought. And then education. What education does this Krishna have? People say he went to Sandipani Muni's ashram to learn, but then he came back after 64 days, right? I don't know what education he has taken from there. And then not only that, this Krishna, he runs away from battle as well. Jarasandha, when he attacked the 18th time, he runs away from the battle as well. So this is interesting because Rukmi's disposition made him see only the negative aspects, right? So-called negative aspects. Anything related to Krishna is transcendental. But even within that, the disposition of Rukmi made him see only the negative aspects. He did not see that um, Krishna defeated Jarasandha for the first 17 times. He just saw that, oh, this Krishna, he runs away from battles, right? In this way, he thought, if it will be great injustice to my sister Rukmini if she gets married to Krishna. So traditionally, they do this Swayamvar. Swayamvar is a ceremony where this warrior lady, warrior princess, she gets to choose her husband. And he thought, if we have this ceremony of choosing a husband for Rukmini, and Krishna, he'll definitely come for that ceremony. And if he comes there and Rukmini chooses Krishna, then it'll be a problem. So let's not have that ceremony at all. So then he goes ahead without his, he sort of he imposes this decision on all of his family members that Rukmini will be married to Shishupal. And in this way, Shishupal, who is this demon actually, very critical of Krishna, very, he hates Krishna, he now has this anticipation that this lady, this Rukmini, whose beauty is par excellence in the three worlds, is going to be my wife. And that anticipation made him extremely puffed up with arrogance. And he was very proud, very, very negatively proud of the fact that he'll get to marry Rukmini. So Shishupal actually, in his previous life also, he tried to take away the Lord's consort. So in his previous life, he was Ravana. Right? In his previous life as Ravana, he kidnapped the Lord's consort, Sita Maya. But in this life, the Lord is kidnapping her from him. So that's how the Lord makes it very exciting. And in his last life as Ravana, he kidnapped Sita and he was begging Sita to marry him. And he was trying all kinds of ways and means to convince Sita to marry him. But then we know how eventually Sita, of course, she was pativrata. She was totally dedicated to her husband. So that didn't happen. But eventually we know how Lord Ram came and defeated Ravan and killed him and took Sita back to Ayodhya, to his kingdom. So, but in this life, to make it even more exciting, so in the last life, Ravana had actually kidnapped Sita and was begging her to marry him. But in this life as Shishupal, he's now about to be married to her. And again, the Lord is coming now as Krishna and taking Rukmini away. So in this way, the Lord makes his pastimes very exciting. He's expert at that. Natona Tedaro Yatha. Queen Kunti prays. Like whatever role Krishna plays in his pastimes, he plays them to perfection. It's not that there is some, glitch here and there. He plays it to the perfection. And so Krishna's pastimes have all the aspects that captivate our mind. Like what do people look for in a movie? People look for a storyline. People look for emotion, right? People look for thrill. People look for action. Then if there are any plot twists, wow, that is like a bonus. And people also look for some message out of the movies, right? Out of the movies or whatever digital content is out there today. And they look for adventure in the movie and so on. Now, if you look at Krishna's pastimes, there is all of this. There is storyline, there is thrill. I mean, just this pastime itself, we can imagine how thrilling it is, and we'll cover that the remaining part of the pastime as well. There is thrill, there is emotion, there is action, there are plot twists, there is a message that is being conveyed, and there are adventures as well. But most importantly, they are supremely auspicious. These pastimes of Krishna, as we discussed earlier, they are non-different from Krishna. They have the same nature as Krishna, therefore they transform our hearts and take us closer to God. Anyway, coming back to the pastime, all these demoniac kings were present there and looking lustfully at Rukmini. But it is described that they were seeing a material form of Rukmini. So in the purport, it is written very beautifully that thus the heroic kings assembled in Vidarbha were agitated with lust upon seeing the Lord's illusory potency and expansion of Rukmini. In other words, no one can lust after the Lord's eternal consort, since as soon as one's mind is contaminated with lust, the covering of Maya separates one from the pristine beauty of the spiritual world and its inhabitants. So, based on what our consciousness is, whether we want selfish enjoyment or whether we want to please the Supreme Lord, based on that, the Lord's energy, which is known as Maya, she will manifest herself to us. So, these kings who were trying to lust after the Lord's eternal consort, the Lord's eternal consort automatically covers herself. And what these kings were seeing, therefore, was an illusory aspect of Rukmini and not Rukmini herself. And this verse describes that she was so beautiful that all these demoniac kings, they fell down unconscious. And now Krishna could have easily taken her when they were unconscious, because that would have been an easy win, right? But just to make things more exciting, he waited till they all came back to consciousness. He waited, and then when everybody was back in consciousness, back into consciousness, and we read how Rukmini moved, some strands of her hair that were blocking her vision in a very graceful way. With her left hand, she did that. And when she did that, and she was shyly looking at everyone, everybody was at the peak of their attraction. All the kings there, they were at the peak of their lustful attraction. Shishupal was at the peak of his anticipation that this woman will be my wife. And Rukmini herself was at the peak of her, anticipation that Krishna will now come and take me. She's searching for Krishna eagerly in that assembly. And thus, when everybody's emotions were at peak, Krishna came, held her hand, took her away, mounted the chariot, and left. As if there was no competition or concern. Krishna did not even show urgency. Like when somebody elopes in this world, they have to plan it very nicely. Oh, whether we'll take the Amtrak or whether we'll, take a rental car, because, oh, what about Uncle John, our neighbor? He takes the Amtrak to work, right? What if he sees us? No, 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 let's not take the Amtrak. So we have to plan all these things when we have to elope in this material world, but that's not the case for Krishna. So Krishna did not show any urgency. He just held Rukmini's hand. He did not even show the concern that he should go unnoticed. He just held her hand, mounted the chariot with her, and left. And this totally decimated the pride of these other demoniac princes. So they were seeing that, oh, like we saw what Jarasandha is saying. It's like a jackal is taking a deer away from an assembly of lions, right? It's That's what Jarasandha is saying. Because that really hurt Jarasandha and everybody present there. How can Krishna can just come and take the princess away, who is supposed to marry my dear friend Shishupal, like Jarasandha is saying. So it is said that when Krishna wants to give us happiness, when God wants to give us happiness, he's the best at it. He'll give us so much happiness that we'll be overwhelmed with bliss. But when he wants to make us miserable also, he does that perfectly. He does that perfectly as well. And of course, God making us miserable has a purpose. And the purpose is to rectify our disposition, to rectify our consciousness, and to dovetail it back towards Him. And that's where our actual happiness lies. Anyway, to conclude, this is a very auspicious pastime, as I said. During when my grandmother had passed away, we have a mourning period of 13 days. And on the 13th day, there is a feast in the honor of the deceased, and many guests come. And so I went for this 13th day ceremony of my grandmother's passing away. And there everybody sat down in a room and they said, okay, we'll be having katha now. And I thought, okay, katha, they might have katha from Garud Puran. Garud Puran is a one particular text which talks about death and afterlife. But then amazingly, this person came, this priest from a Madhva Sampradaya Mutt. He came and Madhva Sampradaya temple. He came and narrated the pastime of Rukmini getting married to Krishna. I mean, imagine it's the 13th day of somebody getting deceased, and you're hearing the story of Rukmini getting married to Krishna. Why? Because these stories are auspicious. And that's when I realized that the auspiciousness of these stories are accepted across all the traditions, at least within India. And that was a nice thing. Anyway, I had a metaphor to share, but I'll maybe keep that for the discussion. But yeah, let us all try to develop that affinity to hear Krishna's message through Guru and the Vaishnavas, so that one day Krishna will come and kidnap our consciousness and reinstate us in our true position of being his servants. So to summarize, we spoke about the two people whose anticipation was rising. That's Rukmini and Shishupal. We spoke about the fact that Krishna Prema or love for God is in all of us and can be awakened when we hear Krishna's pastimes, we hear the message of Krishna. And how do we develop that taste to hear the message of Krishna? By serving the great souls. And we saw how Krishna totally decimated the pride of the princes in the way he took Rukmini away. And we also saw the important point where the pastimes of Krishna are not only supremely auspicious, but they also have all the aspects that attract our minds, that captivate our minds. So thank you very much, dear devotees, for your patient hearing. If there is any feedback, questions, comments, please.
Thank you, Jagannath Gopal Prabhu. Wonderful class. So many takeaways and reflections that I have. One of them being that it rightfully belongs to Krishna, therefore it's meant to be used in that mentality, that it's not for me to enjoy, it's not for me to control, it's not for me to renounce either. It's for me to use in Krishna's service. We will be dealing with material energy, but if we do it in the spirit of understanding that this is Krishna's, how did you say it, potency? Don't try to be lustful for something that belongs to Krishna. Don't try to use it for yourself. You'll be fine. But thank you for that. That's my takeaway. Would anyone else like to share what you liked about this class? Or maybe there's a disagreement? I'd like to check on my friend Greg. Did the class make sense, Gregory? We take it as a yes. Okay. Dear devotees, please speak. Unmute yourself. Damodar Priya.
Hare Krishna, Jagannath Gopal Das Prabhu. Thank you so much for class. I have a takeaway and a question. So one of my big takeaways from this was being careful of our disposition to only see the negative and to kind of see the things that are skewed. And so, yeah, that can be very dangerous in terms of like when things are not going our way, thinking that it's a negative, but there's, like you said, there's always a plan and there's always a reason when Krishna does what he's doing. So it's so important to remember that. And then I was wondering when you said that when we serve the great souls who have an affinity for Krishna, or I think it was in the purport, then it increases our enthusiasm to hear about Krishna.
Mm.
How do we then encourage that in ourselves in the moments when we're not serving them, like outside of those moments when we're doing seva, like how do we still kind of increase that taste? I don't know if if that makes sense or not.
No, that's a very pertinent question. And from what I've heard is even when we are not doing seva per se, we can have the disposition of doing whatever we do in the form of a seva. So in that sense, we can, okay, if we want to work, then we should work. Sometimes oftentimes our work is not directly related to Krishna, but we can work in a consciousness that, okay, Krishna has put me in this situation, and that's why, because Krishna has put me in this situation, I have to do justice to Krishna's plan by playing this role in the best possible way I can. So in that way, we can try to develop that disposition. And in fact, in one of the important verses of the Gita that talks about our occupational duty, Shreyan Swadharma Viguna, in 18, I think it's 18.46. Prabhupada very explicitly writes there that we should always think that the occupational duty that we are in, we should think that Krishna has put us in this situation, put us in this particular occupational duty, and therefore we should do it as a dedication to him. So that way we can try to develop that disposition. And then however much possible, like so many devotees here, they try to serve other devotees, other senior Vaishnavas, right? Even through whatever they do, they might have some material skill set, they might use it for, they might have a nice skill set of managing. So some devotees might manage the visit of a great soul. So when a great soul visits, they might manage they might use their skills in that sense. So in this way, we have to try and find various ways to serve Vaishnavas. But even when it is not possible directly, we can try to develop that disposition. And even chanting is a very potent method, because when we chant, we develop that disposition to carry throughout the day. And when we carry that disposition throughout the day, that improves the quality of our chanting in turn. So again, there is this sublime cycle that works. I don't know if that answered your question, but Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Anybody else
Gautam
want to
Ghosh
answer
wrote something.
Mataji's question? Sorry, go ahead, bro.
I wanted to read what Gautam Ghosh, hold on, what Kartik said, I'm sorry. Very interesting that the only person who didn't lose his senses upon seeing Rukmini's beauty was Krishna. Wonderful class, thank you. Thank you, Kartik, wonderful reflection. Kartik is a very deep thinker. He's very quiet, he's very deep. Adipusha Prabhu, Temple Room.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for the class. Very sweet. Not everyone sees things the same way. You brought that point up. There is a material vision, and then there's Shastra Chakshush, seeing things through the eyes of Scripture. Just like we were reading recently about Richard Wurmbrand, and he was in Romania, and the communist government came in, and they destroyed all the churches and closed down all the convents and monasteries. And they were thinking, this building is a waste of time. We shouldn't spend or use this building for worship and scripture. We should make it into a factory or a grain storage place. So they closed down. Their vision was that there's no money or effort, to be wasted on making a place of worship. And it was very interesting. In our own experience, we were asked to prepare the Bhakti Center for Radha Muralidhar. And at that time, there was no temple in Manhattan. And so we went out, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur went and collected a small donation from so many people. By Krishna's grace, my personal share of this was I spoke to 350,000 people. 350,000 people, one at a time. And most of them had the mentality that why spend money for it? We showed them pictures of the building, we explained what we were going to do. And so there is that mundane perspective, and then by the grace of the spiritual master, people are encouraged to actually change their way of looking at things. And we're currently considering making a place for Kirtan and Bhagavatam class over on the west side. And it costs money. And people are saying, wait a minute, why, we won't have enough, Krishna won't provide. But somehow or other, even when the prasad distribution program we're taking care of now for the last 24 years, when it began, I was thinking, how can I do that? I don't have money, I don't have a vehicle, I don't know how to cook, I don't have a kitchen, how? But Krishna said, look it, I'm floating, there's planets in space effortlessly. I can support this. If it's what Krishna wants, it will be supported. So our real criteria for deciding whether to go ahead to expend time or effort or using a space is to wonder what Krishna wants. And as far as I know, Prabhupada had that same vision. And here the Bhakti Center is gloriously taken care of by so many nice devotees. Radha Murali are all happy.
Yeah. Thank you, Adipusha Prabhu. Wonderful point. Okay, darshan time. Turn on your cameras.
Wow. Hare Krishna. It must be that something very auspicious is about to happen.
I think so.
I think so.
It's a clear sign. Jai Shri Radha Brahmana Chandra Bhagavan Jai.
Kali, Govinda, Hari Purusha, Tamaham Bhajami.
Venam Khandhantam Aravinda Dalayantacham Bhagavatam Samasitam Puranam Sundaram Gandharvakom Vikamaniya Visheshachoma Govindam Hari Purusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Hari Purusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Hari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Anganiyasya Sakale Priyaprimanti Asyanti Manti Kayanti
Okay, this was the class Any final instructions for us, Jagannath Gopal Prabhu? Here's the question, Jagannath Gopal Prabhu, since you're here. How do we know that we are doing something that is pleasing to Krishna? In other words, how do we know if what we're doing, that we're acting on behalf of Krishna and Prabhupada in our efforts to please them and not going against them? Because sometimes devotees claim that what they're doing is pleasing to Krishna, and sometimes we claim that. So how do we guard against driving into a ditch, in our effort to please Krishna?
Yeah, there are a couple of points. One thing is that, yes, many people ask this question, that Krishna was there to instruct Arjuna as to what to do. Who is there to instruct us? So how do we know that what we are doing is correct? So one way is we need to approach the representative of Krishna. We need to approach the representative of Prabhupada. And that is what even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. If you want to understand this spiritual knowledge, he doesn't say read the Bhagavad Gita. That's interesting. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying if you understand the absolute truth, he's saying go to a spiritual master. Of course, he's not saying don't read Bhagavad Gita, but along with reading Bhagavad Gita, you also go to a spiritual master. You go to a guru. You approach the Vaishnavas. So in that sense, we can try to see who is following Prabhupada and who is following Prabhupada, and Prabhupada is following Krishna. So we have to identify who is following Prabhupada, which is again a very, 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 very subjective thing. But then again, I would just see it as everyone having different flavors, everybody trying to emulate one different aspect of Prabhupada. So in that sense, everybody is trying to serve Prabhupada. But as long as somebody is trying to genuinely serve Prabhupada, I think that is good. Another thing that I feel is if we are genuinely trying to do something, it will actually bring about humility in our hearts. So if we are practicing the process in the correct way, it will bring about some kind of humility within the heart. So we can see whether that's happening or not, whether humility is developing in our heart. If pride is developing in our hearts, then we can understand that, oh, okay, there is something wrong here. I need to recalibrate my disposition here. So that is one more way. So again, humility doesn't mean, oh, I'm very fallen, I'm good for nothing. That's not humility. Humility is following that statement by another statement. The other statement is, I can do something to serve the Lord. So if I just say that I am fallen, I am good for nothing, and just leave it at that, that is actually, in a sense, false ego masquerading as humility. But when we say that, okay, I'm good for nothing, I am a fallen person, but I can do something to serve Krishna. So let me try it to the best of my ability. That is true humility. And this humility is a very deep concept. I've been trying to hear classes and really trying to process what true humility is. But yes, that is one symptom, that humility will develop. Pride will go away when we do the process right. So
thank you. So to be on the right side of things, we need to approach someone who genuinely follows Prabhupada. And the symptom of us being on the right side is that humility develops.
yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Would anyone like to share anything during the afterglow? The class was the glow, now is the afterglow.
So
Okay.
Damodar Priya Mataji is asking any sweet stories of baby Prithu and Bhakti. That's her forte, Mataji's forte. She develops kids in Bhakti. So that question is very apt coming from her. Well, yeah, I mean, one thing that he does nowadays, again thanks to my wife's training, is that even nowadays when we say Prabhupada, or we say, we show him a photo and say this is Narsimhadev or this is Radha Murlidhar, he automatically offers his obeisances. So Wherever he's sitting here next to me, he's sitting on a table next to my laptop. I ask him, okay, where is Prabhupada here? He will show Prabhupada and then offer his obeisances. Just something that it has become like a thing for him because his mom has taught him that. So it's funny sometimes because people are crowded around and then we say Prabhupada or something and then he just goes like this. So I hope he keeps that into going into his adulthood and teenage and adulthood.
Yeah, it's all about keeping the things that we may manifest here and there. It's all about keeping them.
Yes.
Yeah, good point, Jagannath Gopal. Let's all bless baby Prithu. How old is Prithu, Maharaj?
It's 20 months almost.
20 months, yeah. Okay. Jai. We have something in the chat from MG Das. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. Srila Prabhupada. Mother Gopal, MG Das, would you like to comment on that?
Yes,
you like-
Prabhu. Hari
Yeah.
Bol, wonderful class. Jagannath Gopal, Prabhu. I especially liked your points. I mean, how the Lord's pastimes are so amazing and mind-blowing. And when they connect to his previous incarnations, like, Ravan kidnapped Sita Devi. So he kind of, I'll get back to you by kidnapping someone you're about to marry. That's really sweet. Thank you for sharing that. So I found this particular quote from Prabhupada in the purport. And Prabhupada's defining humility. And it seems defining humility is like such a difficult thing because it's not just like, keeping your head down and mumbling to yourself and staying out of the way. And some people think, oh, that's so humble. But Prabhupada, he just defined it in a very simple way. He says you shouldn't have the anxiety. You shouldn't be anxious to be acknowledged or to be recognized. But that doesn't mean that you don't have, doesn't mean you don't have a natural, even desire, or at least expectation. Yeah, hey, I accomplished this. It'll be nice if they announce my name. But if they don't, it's all right. It's not a big deal. That is humility. You see, the anxiety is not there. The depth. See, anxiety reflects the depth of attachment. It doesn't mean that you suppress your natural expectations. Doesn't mean that, it's the amani namanadhyana concept, right? That we can be fine completely if nobody compliments us, but we have to appreciate others. So that is when Prabhupada puts it in these simple words, and we reflect on it a little bit deeper, we realize we don't have to be unnatural. We don't have to go against our natures. We do have to work against or work to undo our lower natures. Lower nature means, if I'm being obnoxious, if I'm taking credit when it really wasn't due to me, things like that. Because that's also natural. The Prabhupada said you should go for, we have both a higher nature and lower nature. So let us do things that appeal to the higher nature and work and identify things that lower nature. So humility is a big part of that. The funny saying says, it's really hard to be humble when you're so great, but somehow I'm managing, So that's another aspect of it, that feel proud of our ability to express our humility. So it's kind of tricky like that. But if we just give up the anxiety, why are we stressing about this thing? If one, it'll make you more natural, and two, you from, because when you're stressed out about that affects your health too. Any kind of stress is bad for you. So when you're a devotee and you do it right, it's basically removing stress at every level from your life. Thank you, Prabhu.
Amazing. I just love what you said. Anxiety reflects the depth of attachment. It's very deep. But honored, Prabhu, Madan Gopal Prabhu, very honored to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Oh.
Yes.
Hello? Yeah. Next door to the Bhakti Center, there's an appliance store. And there's this guy right here. His name is Joe. And Prabhupada tells us practice makes perfect. And you sow what you reap what you sow, right? So he's sweeping the sidewalk right now, Joe. So this couple came along, tourists heading for the subway. And they asked Joe, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? You probably heard this before from other people. And Joe said, you got to practice and practice and practice. Carnegie Hall is a place where they have concerts and music performers go there. He said they were asking directions how to get to Carnegie Hall. He told me you have to practice. So we have to practice these things. And Ananda Bihari asked this really nice question. Well, how do you know what Krishna wants you to do? If you're just following your own ambition, you might do something and wind up in a ditch, So the advice we have from Srila Prabhupada is put it before the Lord. Ask the Lord what to do, and then be willing to do it or not do it. Be totally on the fence.
Yeah,
and
but
then,
that's precisely my question.
Just let me finish. Let me finish, please. You won't let me finish? All right, I won't finish. You can talk. Can I finish?
Saying that was my question. You put it before the Lord, and then how do you know? Where do you go from there?
I'm trying to answer you, but you're interrupting.
I apologize.
All right, listen carefully. In the Bible, I just read yesterday that Gideon was asked to raise an army and attack the Midianites who were oppressing the devotees. And he said, wait a minute, I'm not a soldier. I don't have an army. I don't know anything about fighting. And so what he did was he put out a fleece. He put out a sheepskin outside his house. And he said, Lord, I need a sign. I'm going to put out a fleece. If tomorrow morning the fleece is dry and the ground is wet with dew, I'll know that you want me to do this. He put out a fleece, and it came out the next morning, and the ground was dry, and the ground was wet, and the fleece was dry. So he said, I'll put it out again. Tomorrow, if the fleece is wet and the ground is dry, I'll know you want me to do it. So he went out the next morning, and the ground was like dusty powder, and he picked up the fleece, and all this water came out of it. So we can put it before the Lord, and then if you don't think that you can get in touch with your spiritual master, or there's nobody you respect who might feel like they're following carefully and might be able to advise you, you can put out a fleece. Lord, if you want me to do this, let there be a check for $5,000 in my mailbox tomorrow. And let's see. Krishna you don't think Krishna knows our question? We don't think Krishna can answer? Krishna is so cool. He will answer. Anyway, that's what I've heard.
Do it that way. We'll all publicly put out a fleece and then see what happens. So that
Let me see if there's a $5,000 check in my mailbox tomorrow. Okay.
We'll put out that fleece publicly. Yeah.
Okay. Just did. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, dear devotees, let's wrap it up. I know it's interesting, but let's respect Krishna in the form of time. So, Bhima Prabhu, one final thought.
I just feel that we can pray, but Adi always says this: pray to God, but tie your camel to the tree. So one shouldn't test Krishna by saying, you give me the answers. Krishna wants us to use our intelligence. He gives us strength enough to carry bags of grain. I have to use that strength to carry bags of grain to serve the animals, so I have to use that. So we use if we're unsure, then you sit down and you try to figure, you go figure. Krishna says, I'm the intelligence of the intelligent. I'm the source of all memory and forgetfulness. So if you have a sincere desire, have good faith in yourself that if you have a sincere desire to spread Krishna's name and fame and to assist the devotees in doing so, then Krishna will make arrangements. The big thing here is patience, intelligence, and patience, and the courage to put your shoulder to the wheel when the time comes to exert yourself in any particular direction, whether that be giving money or lifting bags of grain. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Bhima Prabhu. Okay, this was the class. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Krishna being capable of giving us all the answers. Ki Jai. Jagannath Gopal Prabhu. Ki Jai. Gregory Prabhu. Ki Jai to you. Thanks everyone for participating. Madan Gopal, thank you for giving us your association unexpectedly today. It was nice. Thanks everyone, dear devotees. Have a happy Saturday. Give it to Krishna. Look for the answers and they will come. Do your part.
Is this the old one? Yeah.
Krishnan Vidyanathan, Hare Krishna to you, and